My name is
Jenny.
David.
Lila.
Laurel.
Jen.
Lisa.
Dino.
Hari.
Kyle.
I was a
Jehovah's Witness.
Jehovah's Witness.
FLDS.
In the Amish church.
The chosen people.
I was a Scientologist.
I grew up a Mooney, a member of the Unification Church.
2x2.
And I am
Shunned.
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 Stunned. Stunned.
Shunned.
My name is KJ. I am 34 years old. I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and I am shunned.
I like the question mark at the end of shunned. So we'll get to that as we go. So how did you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
So I was born in, I guess considered born in. Both my parents were studying at the time. They were not married. My mom was on her last year of high school, and they got pregnant with me. My dad had been contacted by the witnesses, per one of my aunts who just recently told me this. He was contacted when he was a teenager. He didn't have a father in his life, and my grandma was kind of doing her own thing, so he had to figure out a way to have some stability. I think that's why he kind of grabbed hold to the organization, and he just took it and ran with it. It took him a while to get baptized because he had a lot of things that he didn't want to take into the organization morally. So he eventually was getting serious with it. Wanted my mother to get serious with it as well, get baptized and all that. But she, I don't know how, but she saw it for what it was at that time and decided that she wasn't with it. She just went her own way religiously. My dad, he just took and flew with it. He ended up getting married to my mom, my stepmom, and she came from a family where it was generational witnesses. So that was very early on in my life. So it was like, for me, this woman is my mom. So to me, I always grew up with two moms. And my mother, she's still in my life. She stayed in my life. It was tough to be able to, have a relationship with her because, when I came along, I was 100% devoted to everything the organization said, believed it. And, anything that came up in my mind that, might have been a question was, quickly dismissed. And I was like, no, this is it. This is the truth. I'm going to, run with it. And, if I stay, then maybe my family will come, who are not JWs. So my mother's.
Oh, were you hoping your mom might take to it then?
Yeah. Like for your whole life as a kid, you're hoping that my mother, would find the truth. She'll come in that, because for us, it was life or death. So, hopefully before the end comes, she would come into the truth. Then we can, be at least be that part of the family together in the truth. And, my siblings too, because she ended up getting married a couple other times after that. She had kids, and my siblings, none of my mother's family are witnesses, never have been. So the only witness on that side of the family was me, and to me, it was more onus on me to be the picturesque witness, because if anybody was going to come in, it was going to be because they saw how good our life was being witnesses. So I was so hoping that someone would see it and want it.
Sure. How old were you when, so your biological mom, she didn't believe, and your father was going head first into this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, how old were you then when there was the change, and then your stepmother, who we'll be referring to as your mom going forward, how old were you when she came into your life?
So let's see. So when my mother was pregnant, they were studying. I came along my dad was baptized. They split up. Again, weren't married. So then, but my mother was never really opposed. So that's another point. So she didn't make it difficult for me to be a witness. Um, don't get me wrong. There were definitely disagreements, but she was never really opposed to me wanting to live my life. But I would say around 3 or 4, things started to change because my dad, he wanted a family. He wanted me to have someone in the house. And so, I was back and forth between houses. So about 4 years old, 5 years old, he started dating other women in the congregations. At that time, there wasn't as many opportunities for single women, so they didn't care. They were going to take a risk on a man from the world who had a kid. At least he wanted to, do what was right according to organizational policy. So, they could see themselves with him regardless. I don't know how my mom got with him because she came from a generational witness family. Her She even like graduated early so that she could pioneer and all these things. She'd been pioneering for years and years. My grandparents, so she was supposed to be a Bethelite's wife, and for her to fall in love with my dad and basically take us in was pretty amazing. And so they got married when I was I started dating when I was about 5, and then at 6 years old they got married. I So that is where it got sketchy because my mother, she was getting married as well. Her husband and her were going to move away from our hometown, and this is per the story that I've been told about my life. Because when you're, 3, 5 years old, you don't really remember that much. So what I was told was my mother wanted to move away with her new husband, who I still have a good relationship with to this day, my stepdad. He and her lived further away from our hometown, so I ended up being fought over legally because my dad did not want her to just take me away. So they went to custody court. And what I'm guessing happened is there's like a clause or whatever you call it legally, where if a child's life is going to be so drastically changed, then you keep it with the parent that will have the most stability. And because I would have moved away from a full entire community and all of that, my father ended up winning, which I thought was normal. I thought it was a 50-50 thing. I didn't realize that the women usually win these things. But my father ended up winning custody court. And I lived with my dad and stepmom my entire life. So that was a crucial moment that I didn't realize because this is just my life, You're just being raised in this.
Sure.
You're a kid, so everything is normal to you. Whatever you're presented with when you're, a little one is normal. And so that I realize now, hindsight's 2020, you as a woman, I can't imagine what you would go through to have your firstborn taken from you into really a culture that you in and of yourself don't believe in and may even think is dangerous because of your own personal beliefs. And now you have to move away from your firstborn child. That I am sure caused her so much mental anguish and the challenges that it can present over time. That stays with you for the rest of your life. So I feel for people who are split up, and this cult, they do this. This is what they do. They make it so difficult for families to stay together when you have a differing of beliefs. And I feel for my mother in that way because now she's got to start this new life with someone, and it's gonna affect her for the rest of her life. What would people think? Why would she lose? All these types of questions that you don't think about when you're growing up, because you just, okay, well, what does the court say? Okay, I'm with mom for some holidays and some weekends, things like that. So um the drama that they had to go through at that time, I can only imagine. And I feel bad for my mother for having to lose me in that way. And I just I what are you gonna do?
But yeah, it's certainly not your fault. You're just
No,
a
right?
kid.
So I feel like, that has a lot to do with, the type of person that she is today. It caused a lot of damage in our relationship, that's for sure. Um, because, I blame the cult for it, because it was unnecessary. Some of the things that I could have had a much better time with her, um, if there was no cult influence. Um,
Yeah, and I don't even know, and you may not know, but a lot of times when there are any sorts of custody battles or custody issues that come up, oftentimes the witnesses will rally to the witness who's involved, and they'll try to crush the person on the other side with just person after person as the Kingdom Hall rallies around, because we've got to keep this kid in the organization, and there's just no feelings for the humanity, even just the basic humanity of the other parent in this situation.
I can tell you that of the people, particularly the people that studied with my mother, um, no one ever badmouthed her to me. But what you just said was 100% true. They rallied around my dad and stepmom like crazy. Obviously, we had generational support on my mom's side, where it was just, my great grandma was a witness. So we were all witnesses, and we were like, this is the right thing. Jehovah gave us a victory. We are going to be able to move forward from here. And I didn't think it was a bad thing at all. I was like, well, this is Jehovah's will. And I'm glad that, I got to be in an environment where I could do Jehovah's will a little easier. So while it may not have badmouthed my mother, this ginormous chasm is between us now. And I have amazing support on one side. So also, the people on my mother's side of the family are amazing. All my family on that side of the family, they are really into having a secure future. So either way, I would have had a good family characteristic or relationship, and a good future, which I guess is the main point of a family court decision, is what's the best for the child's future. Either way, it would have been fine. I think, I don't know if they regret having to go through that situation. I don't think they ever would go through it again. They never did again. My mother had other kids from split relationships. She never went through custody again. She just, kind of just moved on with her life. And just for the record, like I I I love my mother. I wish things were different, but it's just, I can't blame even my dad. I don't even blame my dad for this. I blame the cult a lot for a lot of the issues, because they made things harder.
Well, it's the cult intolerance of any other religion or any other perspective, right? It's um, there can only be, it's all or nothing. It's one way or it's the other, as
Yeah,
far as they're concerned. And so, and you're just you were a kid getting, this is what you were being taught. Your dad had fallen into this thing, and so he's being taught this and he's believing it. Your stepmom, for the purpose of this conversation, she's generationally involved in this thing, and there's a narrative that surrounds the whole thing, and everybody, it's like everybody there had good intent probably, and was just trying to do what they thought was right.
yeah.
So sometimes when even everyone can try to do what is right, and somebody can still get hurt.
Yeah. And my dad, what are you gonna do? You're blaming a kid in America, um, and you're trying to give him the best. And you don't know what can happen. You see all these kids that look like your kid and they're doing well. The ones that look like your kid outside the world are in the world, they don't look like they're doing as well. So yeah, I'm gonna go with this organization that seems to be doing well for these children. Um, can't blame him for that. He was very
Yeah.
strict. He could have lost me. So, anything happens. I got hurt, anything like that. It was such a tedious mess with, they had to make sure that the visitation was exactly when they say, it's just a lot of extra stress. And then, um, you're going through a system. So anything that comes up, my mom definitely would never say anything against my mother. Um, that I'd come home, I'd talk about my other family to both sides. They both had to sit there and listen to it, whether or not they cared, you know. Um, but I talk about how good of a time I had with them, or I talk about how good of a time I had with that. And, as a kid, mentally, I was always trying to protect the other side, um, from the other side. It's like, they're not bad people. Look at what we've done. They're not bad people. Look at what we've done. So, it was a constant fight, and I felt like it was just a tug of war up and until like age probably 13. I could start to decide who I wanted to spend time with. It was just a tug of war, and I couldn't really feel like I enjoyed any part of my life. So I really had to. I felt like if I enjoyed too much a part of my life, I was going to make one parent disappointed. Because if you're responsible for me going to Disney World and I had a good time and I came home and you can't afford it because I'm with you now, then I feel bad. So it was a lot of that. And I literally, that made me, I ended up in therapy because of that. Um, minus the religion. So the religion also, though, during that time, I kind of latched onto it because I knew that my mother was watching and she wasn't a witness. And then my parents, they also had a lot riding on this. But my dad, he made some mistakes. All my parents made some mistakes with training me as a child. And I feel like um, I had to find a way to just make this independent. Despite any of my parents or what they believe, these are my beliefs. I wanted this. I wanted this to be the truth. And I know that no matter what my parents do, I'm always going to have this um, at the core. My parents can leave the organization. My mother cannot want it, but this is who I am. So that became my identity. Um, I really believed everything. And I really latched onto it. And even to this day, like my parents would even say that I was more devoted than anybody else in the family. I found myself by myself a lot because if there were other kids that wanted to do something that wasn't necessarily kosher, I had to, make the decision. No, I have goals. I want to do this. I'm going to be all right. Just doing this. Um, you know, it, it was hard to realize that, okay, even within the organization, I have to be set apart, different, special because of this. And I didn't even realize, who I was, meaning like what people thought of me. Um, they realized that I was different, that I was on a little bit different of a track than most of the kids and the congregations that I was in. Um, and so, they viewed me as different. And no, you don't really know that until people start to say things, or you start getting treated differently by people. People who are double lifing, as it was, um, they kind of draw back from you, and so you're like, okay, well, that kind of makes you think, okay, yeah, I gotta do this for me. So yeah, like at 7 years old, I started Unbaptized Publisher. Um, I don't know when I had my first talk, but I think it was about the same time. I think you have to be on the school before I'm baptized publisher, right? Yeah. So I'd had my first talk probably at like 6 or 7 years old. Um, and then so, yeah, I just latched onto it, and it wasn't because of my father. It wasn't because or in spite of my mother or anything like that. I literally just did it because I really wanted to do it. And, I went for the goals. I started doing that, and then you get into the work of it. So unbaptized publisher at 7, 13, I got baptized. Um, and I talked to my mom about it, and she asked me, did you make a dedication? I hadn't.
Yeah, what's that?
I hadn't made a dedication. And at the time I believed in God. Um, so I said, yeah. So she said, well, before you start your questions, and then you need to make a dedication by yourself to Jehovah. And I said, okay. So I remember vividly doing that. And I would say, for as far as the organization and policy and things like that, she was a real core influence, I would say, because she was very balanced. It wasn't a strict from her. She was like, "Well, be reasonable. We're not perfect. Um, you know who you are. You know who your God is. Um, Jesus died for us. All that kind of stuff." So she was very much a reasonable person. Still is a very reasonable person, even though she was born in a witness.
So she was balanced when it came to the fact that you had not yet dedicated yourself. She didn't fly off the handle or freak
No,
out about it
no.
in some way. She was just like, oh, well, okay, well, then here's what dedication is, and here's how you would need to do that without being harsh.
Yeah, and she was a very stable force in my life at a kind of a tumultuous time that I didn't know I was in. With my father, he was just trying his best, and so he was way far left. My mother, she was really trying not to be the bad person, but also she wanted to have a relationship with her firstborn, so she was doing everything that she could on her end. So it was the extreme opposite, and so my mom, it being in the middle, really stabilized me. And again, you're coming from a strong JW background. Of course, I'm going to latch on to you and latch on to the organization, because that's what is giving me stability. And that's where I'm like, yeah, this is my piece. This is where I'm good at, all that.
I was gonna say it's not just stability; it was kind of identity as well.
Absolutely.
And you had really latched onto it. What was it that made you want to get baptized at 13? Why then was there something that happened? Was it because I have to say I find it interesting because you and myself and many other people, when it comes to that whole dedication part, right?
Mhm.
Most of us as kids, if you asked us, did you dedicate yourself? Yeah, sure. Like we didn't, it's not like we had some relationship with Jehovah.
Right.
We were just trying to do what we thought was right and
Yep.
trying to check the boxes and move down the conveyor belt, so to speak,
Mhm.
as young witnesses so that we were accepted, so that we thought we were doing the right thing. But
Mhm.
for a lot of us, I don't know that there was really much more than that, or
Yeah.
maybe hoping that we would get baptized and it would wash away some sin that we were hiding. But so for you, what was it that made you say, all right, I'm 13 years old, it's time?
So I I knew I wasn't going to do anything else.
Mm,
I'm like, if this is the truth, this is the end all be all. So yeah, I'm gonna get baptized. This is my salvation. It's time, because I'm 13, and in the witness world, 13 is when you should be making a lifelong decision. So I'm like, yeah,
of
it's
course.
time. It's a lot of that. They used to say, oh, it's not a coming of age thing, but it is. It's a coming of age thing. When you're 13, you're not baptized, you don't have any goals, they're gonna start questioning, or questioning your parents. So I loved and lived it. And I said, you know what? Yeah, let's get baptized because I'm not going anywhere else. Um, and according to what they had taught me from the Bible, yeah, the world was bad. 9/11 had happened. Um, and it's like, yeah, we got no other hope but this. So we're doing this.
Well, then that cuts to, so what was the worldview that you had? So you're a 13-year-old seasoned veteran Jehovah's Witness kid who clearly understands the whole world because you've been told certain things. But what was the worldview that you had as this grizzled 13-year-old who'd been taught certain things?
Grizzled war vet, that's top tier right there. My worldview was definitely the world is scary. You're nothing without Jehovah. Get baptized so you save yourself. I also, because I had other siblings, and nobody in my family was a witness on that side. I thought if I make it, then even if my mother doesn't make it, maybe my siblings can come on my ticket. So I kind of took a little bit of ownership on that for me because, I love my siblings, and another regret, don't have many regrets in my life, but one of the biggest regrets is allowing the organization to take so much time from my siblings. We don't have a whole lot of childhood memories. So, I wish that I could have more time with my brothers and sisters.
Man, this goes back to that whole thing we talked about a minute ago. The you had good intentions. You thought you were saving them. You
I thought I was, yeah.
like you said, that somehow that was going to help them ride on your ticket.
Yep.
So much pressure on a kid.
Dude, I said I had to go to therapy because of that. In my adulthood, the pressure to cure the inner child or heal the inner child, I had to. It came out sometime during COVID, and I ended up having to go to see a therapist about it just to help me realize that I don't have to take ownership of other people's emotions. I can, I can live my life the way I want without having to worry about what everybody else thinks and feels about it. Even if they pull their support, you just find a way to live autonomously. And that was when I was in the org still. I was still in the org when I went to the therapist. So, I really had to release myself from, making like it was like, so I would hang out with my family. I had moved away. I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but I moved away from home. And so anytime I went back home, it had gotten to the point where anytime I went home as an adult, if I didn't spend equal amount of time with both sides of my family, I would feel bad. So, and even like I'd even heard some family members say, "That's not fair. You spent 2 days with them. You didn't spend any time with us." It's like my time. I only have so much time. So it was a lot of that.
Wow, you're touching on something that's interesting because Jehovah's Witnesses, the group, is a lot of narcissism that results in a lot of codependency. A lot of people that are spending their lives trying to not upset the apple cart because the responses tend to be so outsized. And a lot of people pleasing, trying to make sure that you keep everybody happy. But you had not only that piece, but you also had these two sides of your family that you, as a child, are feeling responsible for, that you're having to make sure that everyone else is happy, when really it should be the parents trying to make sure that the kid is, well, happy in a reasonable way, right? And that's so backward, and also just, wow, I can see how that would have really led to you. I mean, on top of that, you've got the savior complex of just being a JW, and that we're all going to knock on doors and save the world. We're responsible for stumbling others. We were made to feel responsible for other people's feelings at a deep, deep level. and then throw that into your family situation, and you're trying to serve Jehovah, and you're hearing these messages. My goodness, KJ, that must have been a very, very heavy burden.
Yeah, and you don't realize it. You don't realize it until you become an adult. And you have to be faced with, okay, why am I acting like this? You know, what is going on in my life to where I'm distressed today, or I responded this way, you know, all those things. And I had a very religious, so my mother, she's not religious. I would say she has belief, she has faith, but her family were extreme opposite of JW. They were what do you call it? Apostolic Pentecostals. And my grandfather was a deacon, and my grandmother is a mother in the church. So it was heavy on the religion on both sides. And so the witnesses are saying that's false religious. I go over there, they're not saying nothing about the witnesses. And that was another telling thing for me. It was just like, they never badmouth witnesses. We badmouth them all the time.
Yeah, that religious intolerance.
Right.
Yes.
So when I knew that, yeah, their religious beliefs to me seem extreme today. But by and large, these are people who want financial well-being, want education. They want well for their families. They treat their families well as much as possible. They're not perfect, but they're pretty picturesque people, you know, middle class family, just trying to get through. So yeah, it just, to me, I knew it wasn't true what the witnesses were saying about other people in other religions. So that was kind of a deciding factor for me too going forward, which is like, okay, I know, like my grandmother on my mother's side is the most genuine, the most precious woman I know. And if you're telling me that Jehovah is going to destroy that woman at Armageddon, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to do some more convincing, because no one that good should ever be destroyed by God's hand, just because she's in the wrong religion. So you had to really convince me otherwise for that. I never really believed that part of it. Of theology, of witness theology. You know, like I said, I didn't know the rules of what Jehovah was going to do when he sent Jesus back and destroyed most of the world. So I really thought that, you know, my siblings would come on my ticket and all that kind of stuff. You know, even, you know, Jehovah would have mercy on my mother, because, you know, she had a rough introduction to the witnesses and all that kind of stuff. Maybe he would see, you know, something differently about her. But, you know, all of this is going through your head. You're not even 13 yet. So, you know, 13 comes along, and, you know, in addition to all of this, then starts the hormones. So here we go. I'm in high school. We're getting into high school. And that was another thing that was a deciding factor for me going into high school, being baptized or not. My mom said you can view baptism as a seatbelt. It kind of protects you as you're driving a car, as you're going through high school, even though you may have these things that are more tempting to you. Your baptism can keep you away from these things by protecting you, because you're already locked in. You can't do these things that you want to do. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. You know, I definitely want to go into high school with more protection. I don't want to go into high school with less protection and then wind up doing something that gives me eternal damnation. So yeah, that made sense to me. And so that was another thing going into high school. That was bigger than anything really, was going into.
I get that. And
Yeah.
I have to laugh, you know, seatbelt's a restraint. It's a restraint. It is to hold you back. It is to keep you from leaving in some ways. I understand. I get the witnesses saying it in a protective way. Truly a seatbelt is, but it is funny to look at it. You know, through it's literally called restraint.
Yeah.
And So can I ask, before we get to your high school experience there post baptism, were you we haven't so you alluded to you were different in the congregation. You knew that you had certain goals, certain things that you were hoping to achieve, that it set you apart in some ways.
Mhm.
Were you did you have friends? Did you have, like, as KJ in the Kingdom Hall, were you fitting in there at all? Did you have friends and you fit in because you had little, you know, witness friends and you go play ball or play toys or whatever growing up, or whatever you would do later on? Or were you more fitting in just because you were like the little golden boy who did all the JW things, and you were the rock star kid who was on the stage all the time and doing all the parts? Like, where did you fit in there?
Yeah, so my parents, I will say that growing up, I don't really, I can't say that they didn't try to make things fun for us. My parents were younger, so they also wanted to have fun.
Mm.
Theme parks, people over the house. We grew up in, so where I grew up, it was already a nice community to raise a family in, with or without being a JW. You throw JW onto that, and it is to the max. So,
Can you
I
explain that?
we grew up, yes. So there were a lot of JW families. In fact, the families were so big, and I was part of one, by my mom's side.
Mm-hmm.
The families were so big, and then you start to marry the families into each other. So you're getting these conglomerate JW families that are just running the whole circuit, literally. There is probably a 5 out of 10 chance that you're going to have somebody in your family on the program of a circuit assembly or a convention. That's just how it was. Plus, it wasn't that big of a city that I grew up in, so it was, you knew everybody. Everybody knew everybody. And even, you go out in service, half the do not calls were JW houses. So um that was what we grew up in. So the family and the friends that I grew up with, um I still feel like they were real. We had literally grown up with each other, and at the congregation I spent the most time in growing up, we had, the way they calculated was from infancy to age 18. In that congregation alone, there's 60 of us, so it was tons of kids,
Oh my
tons of kids, man.
goodness.
But it was funny because they would audibly recognize that every year they'd lose half the teenagers to the world. And so they were always scrambling to keep the organization fun and interesting for us. And this was before Caleb and Sophia. This is before JW Broadcasting, all that stuff. They had to keep it interesting and fun for us. So there was always these extra parties and things like that. And so, and that's kind of how the whole circuit was. Convention was a blast because you're with your friends. You got to see everybody from the whole region. They call it now, a district at that time. And going into high school, it didn't matter that I was with these non-witness kids, or I was the only witness in my class. I had other friends that I could hang out with. And most of them were trying to do the right witness thing. Even those that weren't, with the exception of a couple, they still were not doing anything that bad, and according to witness policy. So I never really felt like, people were necessarily insincere with me, I guess. As we got older, like deep into our teens and closer to graduation from high school, then it got a little bit more, how you say, I had to be a little bit more independent of them because, when you get towards 19 years old and you have the goal of Bethel, you have to really be Like you gotta really like
Yeah, keep
focus
your nose clean.
on a whole lot of stuff, right? So I'm like, oh boy.
It is interesting though that it seems like they feel that the way, so they're hemorrhaging teenagers each year.
Mhm.
The attrition rate's pretty high, and that instead of realizing that maybe it's this thing that they're fleeing from, it's let's keep them happy, let's placate them with fun things or whatever. Let's make sure that when they go into high school, they do so in such a way where they're protected by a seatbelt, but they're looking at the wrong thing. They're looking at in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
They're blaming the wrong thing for what's about to happen.
Yeah.
And it's uh interesting that, and of course they feel like they're going to be able to control that, and I'm sure everybody was like you said, there was a lot of sincerity, but I mean, what 13-year-old kid knows who he is? He's had, like, when I was teasing about the grizzled vet, right? Like, what have you done in life? You've never been exposed to anything else. You've had no other options, so there's been no real choices. So therefore, there's no real decision and there's no real identity there. You're putting on an identity that you hope will save people or make people happy, but you've never had any real choice as to who it is you could be. And so you're just following the one prescribed path. It's the whole double life thing that ends up showing that, oh, this kid actually wants to be this other person. And the JW part's the double life. That's the secondary one. That's the one they've just been forced into. They want
Absolutely.
to go do other things or explore.
Yeah.
And it's just really sad. You all had so much fun together, but then there's this thing in the middle that if you can't agree on is going to end up separating even all you kids
And that's
as
exactly what it
you
did.
get older.
That's exactly what it did. As I got closer to 19 years old, I was a ministerial servant. I also was getting tired of the same old JW routine, at least in the English congregation, where you're just knocking on doors that aren't going to ever open, literally. Every day. These people are not going to, they know who you are. You've been to the same house. You're tired of this. So I said, I need something else. I need something different. I can't keep doing this. And that's when I fell into foreign language and took off with that. Before we go there though, so at 13, I grew up in a school that I was in from 5th grade to graduation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Our community was small. So I knew those kids from 5th grade to graduation. They knew me. They knew I was a witness. They knew I wasn't going to do anything that they were going to even try to tempt me with, which no one ever did, by the way. So I missed my prom, like physically and emotionally missed my prom, because I knew who they were. I knew who these kids were. They knew who I was. And I wanted to spend more time with them. I knew that I could be friends with them and still be a witness, despite what, the policy was. And that's another regret that I have, that I wasn't able to spend time with people who, they're really like your family. I mean, you spend a lot of time with your classmates, man. You're there Monday through Friday, what, 7 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. And then if you have an after school activity, which I was allowed to do, I did band. I was in band. And we had like school spirited things. I've been to maybe 1 or 2 homecoming games, that my parents allowed me to go to, because it was like a crucial, and they knew, you're around the corner. Go ahead, go, just come back. All that. They didn't care. Prom was a no-go. I think mainly prom was a no-go from my parents because it had been such an issue in the area that witnesses were going to prom. Some witnesses were going to prom, and it was always the unexemplary witnesses that were going to prom. But I'm going to venture to say that they probably had the same mindset that I did. They had grown up with these kids their whole life. They want to spend their last night with them together. And you're not gonna do anything wrong, especially if your parents are like, I'm gonna drop you off and I'm gonna pick you up and yeah, you go have your fun with your friends and then come back home. Um, I knew I wasn't going. I was baptized. I was very serious about my baptism. Um, I really wish that I had more time with my friends that I had grew up with in school. And gone to dances, some parties, things like that. I can't say that I wouldn't have done anything, but it was more unlikely that I would have
Yeah, but
not
it's
done
sad how
anything.
reductive. It's the reductive way in which Jehovah's Witnesses see everything. They only
Mhm.
see it. They don't see that these are kids that you've been together with like a full-time job for the past many years. They see it and that you are just wanting to say goodbye in a
Yeah,
way. They see it as, well, it's depraved, and it's, they think the worst of everybody, and they project that into every situation and
yeah,
see everything, again, keeping it at arm's length, as a danger. They can't see it as, oh, maybe these are just some kids that want to say goodbye to each other. I'm sure things happen, of course, at a prom at times, but I don't think it's the oh my gosh, I don't think it's the, like, strip club show that they act like, like, it's everything is such hyperbole, like, they
yes,
the way that, as witnesses, that witnesses are the ones more obsessed with sex than people in the world oftentimes, and it's like they think that everything is about that, and everything is gonna, of course you're gonna, KJ, it's like they have so little faith in you. Well, of course, if you're around sex and alcohol, you're immediately going to jump on that and ride that for the rest of your life.
right, right.
Come on, give
No.
somebody some credit.
Yeah, it was a letdown for me.
Yeah,
My parents, and I said that my dad was an elder, my mom was a pioneer, regular pioneer. So, they had to keep up. The parents, me going to prom was a definite question of my father's privileges and
of
responsibilities.
course.
So,
Yeah, keeping up appearances.
it was more that my parents knew that I wasn't going to do anything wrong. They would have let me go, I'm sure, if that wasn't a factor. Um, you know, Other people looking at us because my dad was an elder and my mom was a regular pioneer was a huge issue during my teenage years. I was so tired of it. And I even told my dad, I said, who cares what we're doing? Why are we always caring about what other people are thinking about our family? And I just hated that. I was so tired and exhausted of that. And to this day, just don't care about what other people think about me. And that's why, I really internalized being in the organization. I didn't care what other people thought about me. I loved my organization. I loved my religion. This is who I was. You can take it or leave it, but I'm going to do this. So, it was, I really didn't, I said, and I felt like, oh, other people should feel that way too. Who cares if we decide to listen to this kind of music? If you don't want to do that, that's fine, but it shouldn't make you leave the organization. So I just felt like that was, it was over the top. It was a cause of, I think, the majority of the fights we had in the house. My teenage years were not very delightful at all. Um, I was an only child in the house. Um, my father and mom, they never had any other kids.
Mm.
So in the house, it was just me. And so they're seeing everything in my eras for the first time. They're teaching me for the first time. I'm their only child. So we had a lot of fights. Teenage years was a lot of fights. I would, the biggest of them, or I would say the core reasoning was, I knew my faith, I knew my beliefs, my morals. Why are you in the way of me expressing it in the way that I would like to? And it was a constant battle. And I remember, I would say, of my childhood, that was probably the worst time that I had dealing with my dad. And I was never going to leave the organization. I know I wanted to leave home. I had ran away 4 times, 4 separate occasions I ran away. And I would always go to other witness houses, or I would go to family.
That's not a good sign, though.
No, it's not. But I didn't want to be at home anymore because my dad was very strict, and I feel like, looking back, as a parent under all the pressure that he was under, you got to get this kid to 18. You're in the home stretch of this custody court battle. You have made it this far. He fucks up now, it's a fuck up on me. And
Oh, but that's it. He fucks up now, it's a fuck up on me. Because as you're talking about all of this, it's just echoing some of the characteristics of the inherent narcissism of Jehovah's Witnesses and this appearance focus. Narcissist in the myth, he looks into the reflecting pool and he sees his own reflection, and he's so captivated by his own reflection that he falls in love with it until he falls in and drowns in himself. Jehovah's Witnesses, it's all about that appearance, and it's all about making sure that everyone else around you appears the same and also reflects back to who you are. And so Jehovah's Witness parents, because of that organizational narcissism, they have to make sure you look like them. You're not a separate person. You're viewed as an extension of them. And then when it comes down to having, me too, my dad was an elder. You got to keep up that appearance because you got to make him look good.
Oh yeah.
You got to make sure that he gets to maintain his status. And if he loses it, it's your fault. Again, making you feel responsible for other people.
Yeah.
It's just it's the witness way. Again, it's just so much pressure that you were apparently trying to run away from.
Oh man.
If you're feeling stuck in your life after cult involvement and can't find the life you want, leaving a cult is a new beginning on a path to healing, not some magical end itself that is healing. Relief from the immediate pain feels good at first, but that's not necessarily true happiness. The feelings of social awkwardness and isolation, lack of self-worth, perfectionism, patterns of being attracted to emotionally unavailable people, not even knowing who you are yourself, all of these things and more are lingering effects of that environment. Being in a cult isn't just following a doctrine, but it's following a culture, a way of life, a way of being that doesn't just go away because you stopped attending meetings. If you want to shortcut the path to healing instead of trying to figure it out on your own, maybe even work with me professionally in my cult recovery coaching practice, you can find opportunities to do that and also for other cool resources at my website, exjwhelp.com. That's exjwhelp.com.
And everybody knew it. A lot of my friends, they didn't want to come over to our house because they knew that my dad was the strictest. My closest friends, of course, at that time were mostly just elders' children. And none of them stayed in the organization, including myself at this point. One went back, but everyone else left. And I remember that time being tough, even talking to my mother, the never JW, she was like, well, just make sure you respect, your father, regardless of, how you feel. You're still a minor. You can come here if you want, but you're still going to your meetings. And, so she never, ever said, don't be a witness then. Never, ever did she say that. She just heard me out. She said, okay, what is going on over there? Like if something big happened, what's going on over there? Why am I hearing your grandma's calling me? Da, da, da. So, it was tough. It was a tough time. And, like I said, hindsight's 2020. You got this kid. He's about to be an adult. Let's finish off strong. But that hammer dropped so hard. I was like, listen, I am almost an adult. I've done pretty much everything that I was supposed to do. Get off. And yeah, the very second I could leave, I left. Now, here's the thing about that. I almost gave myself a little bit of extra credit because I was dealing with my sexuality. And I also had to, you know, understand the fact that my temptation was not just for women, it was also for men. And I have more exposure to men than I do with women. So the fact that I've done all of this up until now that you don't even know about, yeah, get the fuck out of my face, dude, because I'm dealing with this. And when you're going through that sexuality, I'm not, when I say I was dealing with my sexuality, I wasn't dealing with my identity. I knew who I was. I was trying to fight the part of me that was wrong according to their Bible. So I said, I'm doing double the work here. And this is the product of that. And I don't need you, in my head. Hormones are going crazy, 13 years old. I have a type of guy that I'm into, and it was a lot of that type in my school. So it was hard for me to focus on being a witness, but also having this distraction. And, so it made me go harder for the organization
That's
because
so common, and for a lot of individuals, they go harder thinking, well, if I can, maybe I can outrun this part of me by going all in service to Jehovah,
yeah,
and maybe that will keep it at bay, or maybe I can somehow make up for something if I have erred in some way by going harder into the organization.
yeah,
There's a lot of people doubling down in a lot of ways.
yeah. It was um the organization has no help for those who are dealing with LGBTQIA plus. Not that we need any help. Um, but if you wanted to stay a witness and you wanted to, focus on what they tell you to focus on, and you have this, then you are gonna need an outlet. Who do you tell? Who do you do? In what ways do most people have a form of uncleanness? They are masturbating or watching pornography. It's worse if you're doing it and it's gay.
Oh yeah,
So, which
for
is
them.
which are things that um, you don't know that. You don't know that because I think there was a questions from readers in the Watchtower. The person that asked, will you get this fellowship from watching gay pornography? And the answer is yes. And why was it a question from readers? Because it wasn't in anything. It became a standard general knowledge only after that questions from readers. When you become an elder, you see that there are different standards for those in the LGBTQIA plus community, stricter standards for those people than for hetero people. And um, it was mind blowing to me at, another one of the straws. But at the time, my teenage years, these are your horniest of times, at least for guys. And so you're like, how am I going to do this? I didn't know that bisexuality was a thing. Um, I knew I didn't know that I could be. I was always told because I would listen to my dad and his friends, elder friends, talk about it, every so often. Um, and the answer was, if you like men at all, you're gay. Period. That's just how it is, black and white. So in my mind, I'm thinking I'm gay, but why am I gay? Like I like women too. Like that doesn't make sense. I don't feel gay. Um, so it was very uh frustrating for me because I just felt like if I have to be gay and this is how people are going to look at me, then I don't want to be doing this anymore. I would rather not being a witness. I'm talking about living. Um, I didn't have thoughts to take out my own life as it is a clinical issue. It was just a logical thing for me. I don't want to do this if I have to be gay because it's not going to be a happy life for me. To me, the truth was true. It was going to happen. So, believe it or not, that's actually why I stayed alive, is because I thought if I take my own life, I won't have a hope of being resurrected. So I have to suffer. So I decided, okay, fine, I'll just suffer. But it had gotten to the point where I thought, okay, what's the most humane way to do this? What's the way I can do this without hurting my parents the most? Could never come up with a good enough way. And I had actually started to find like a little bit more meaning and happiness with my life and coming to the conclusion that it's okay. And I think after I heard the word bisexual, I realized, oh, I can be bisexual. I didn't know that. And then identifying my sexuality as bisexual, even though I already known that I like both sexes, I was able to say, okay, good. All right. Oh, I sure I'm not the only one who lives like this. And yeah, I do like women, so I'll just focus on sisters. I'll just date them and just make sure that I'm really attracted to them, so I don't have any distractions if I get married when we get married. So yeah, that's what I did. I focused on the girls that I was really into. I pursued the girls that I was really into, and that ended up not panning out well, because I never got into a relationship. But you know that I found a way to get through that on my own because I didn't want to come out and say, "Hey, I have this attraction."
I'm glad that you found a way through it. But I think you touched on something there, and just how many people don't. How many people feel like, well, this isn't worth it, and who I am is not okay, and so I do have to, like, what's the point?
Yeah.
And they give up because of the doctrine, and it's really, really sad that a lot of people probably aren't here that should be,
Hmm.
because they're made to feel a certain way about themselves, to hate who they are in a way that becomes too big for them, and it's
Yeah.
very sad. Um, there's so many gay men that end up that aren't bi and don't have an attraction to women, that
Hmm.
end up trying to force themselves into roles that are not theirs, and it's just absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're a part of something that's making you have to deny who you are and be someone you're not at that level, to where life doesn't even feel worth it anymore. That says something about that thing that you're involved in. It's
Yeah.
not super healthy.
Absolutely. And that is again one of those things. So all these things that are coming up that I keep saying
Yeah.
was a straw later, they're just in the box. They're in the doubt box. You put in that box in your back of your head as a witness so that you can keep moving forward.
Yeah, I like the illustration of the shelf with a certain weight limit, and everybody has their own weight limit, but you take these things, you put them up on the proverbial shelf, and then some people's limits eventually get hit and the shelf come crashing down. Other people, it will never happen, but they have very
Mhm.
sturdy shelves. But
Yeah.
it sounds like you've got a lot of things that you're putting up on your shelf.
Yeah. Yeah. It kept compiling.
Yeah.
So yeah, the teenage years they wound up being survivable. And the first opportunity to leave home was Bethel. And so before Bethel, I had become a ministerial servant. I was in RBC. I was regular pioneering. I had also gone to school because my parents were 75 kids. They had lived through 75. They knew that, okay, well, we at least got to have a little skill here. So they said, listen, you're not going to go to Bethel without a skill. You can take to Bethel this skill and offer it there, but you're not going to blame us for not liking Bethel or having to leave Bethel and not having something to fall back on. And in my mind, I was thinking, but the world's going to end. You know, you always think you're not going to graduate high school. You're never going to hit age whatever. So what the hell do I need to go to school for at all? And they said, no, have a little something. I was a little bit early into school. So I graduated at technically I was 17. So I couldn't even apply to Bethel. So they were just like, look, you can't even apply to Bethel yet. Just go to school, get 2 years in, get your associates, a skill, and move on. And so that is what I did. And my mother was very happy about that because she was like, listen, you please just have something. So I did that. That's how I got into the dental field. And yes, I did take that skill with me to
So
Bethel.
can I, for anyone who listens who's not familiar with 70, when you say there's 75 kids, so so I guess your father wouldn't have been around for that, right? Or
He was around it, but he wasn't in the organization at the time.
okay. But your mom there, she had lived through it. And so 1975, Jehovah's Witnesses basically predicted the end of the world in 1975. People sold their businesses, gave all the money to Watchtower. People cashed out their life insurance at times. People kind of went all in thinking the world's going to end. Some people went out and got deeply in debt and bought fancy things they couldn't afford, as I understand it, because they weren't going to have to pay for them, right?
Yep.
And then, well, the world didn't end in 1975, and here we all are in almost 2025, almost the 50th anniversary coming
Hey, look,
next
we should
year. How
have
about that?
have a party for that.
Yeah, I got something in mind for that. But that's a pretty interesting thing. So it sounds like the cope for that for some was just make sure you're taken care of because you don't know exactly how long we have left.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So my parents were more like I said, my mom was very reasonable. Was a very reasonable witness. So, she was on 100% on board. No, you need to get a skill, do something. My dad was for that too. Actually, I think my parents would have let me go to a 4-year university, not away from home, but a local university and stayed home. I don't think they would have been opposed to that. I know some parents that would have been completely appalled with that decision. Definitely would have put my father's responsibilities in question. But he they would have let me do that for sure. So yeah, go to school, regular pioneer, graduate from school. I started Russian. I was in the Russian congregation. I took that and ran with it because it was my escape from English. English was getting ridiculous. I was so sick and tired of that routine. And Russian was such a nice change up. Very small congregation group, closer friends, new people, new experiences, new culture. All that was pretty cool. I still know it and am fluent in it today. I took that, ran with it. And so all of this was happening at the same time that, I finally got the call to go to Bethel in Brooklyn as a full-time Bethelite for 3 months at first. At that time, they had just did that huge exodus. That was before the mass exodus, the first mass exodus. Patterson Bethel had been built a few years before I got there. And they were rearranging things. So the real reason why they had to leave, well, one of the bigger reasons why they had to leave Brooklyn is because they couldn't facilitate the new printing presses. They had bought the presses. They thought they would fit in Brooklyn, but they were not able to. So they had to move them to Wallkill. And that's when everything started to change. Now Brooklyn was no longer needed. So we started hearing these rumors that Brooklyn was going to shut down and they were downsizing, yada, 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 but nothing concrete yet. And so it had just happened that they had let go, and a lot of people were from Brooklyn. And either they were being transferred from Brooklyn to Wallkill to start working on the new printing presses there, or they were being asked to leave. So a lot of the work at Bethel was support work. So you had your housekeepers, your kitchen staff, your security, transportation, all that stuff. That's all just life support, right? So when you remove the workers who work on the presses, or these other departments like service or writing or legal, when you remove that staff, then the support goes down. And then, the
nobody to support.
Right, exactly. So you're just literally just everybody sitting around just scratching each other's back. So, the organization is really about their money. So they had to figure out a way to, make this more efficient for them. That was one of the reasons.
So can I clarify? So you're saying that the reason that they ended up moving from Brooklyn was that they bought some printing presses um, that didn't work in that facility, so they had to move it?
Yeah, that's one of the major reasons.
That doesn't seem super faithful or discreet.
So, well, okay. So I would say they're just like any other company. They
Right.
they say we have this idea.
Sure.
We talk to the professionals. We talk to the what do you call it? The consultants or whatever, the advisors. We think we should do this. Well, we get there, and we have this idea, but it doesn't actually pan out the way that we want. So we got to make some changes. So, as like any other company would, they did that. So that's what happened. I don't know.
Yeah.
I wasn't in those board meeting rooms.
Yeah. It's just funny to me because like this is supposed to be God directed, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if we can't get that right, well, what if we're also wrong about, I don't know, Armageddon,
Yeah.
and like lots of other things, right?
Yeah.
Some of these other rules, just like we can't. I mean, I'm sure they prayed about it. I'm sure they took it to Jehovah as far as getting this done, and they had people also consultants or whatever. And obviously, I understand mistakes are going to happen, but if mistakes are going to happen, then let's say mistakes might be happening throughout all of it, right?
Absolutely.
Then let's just admit that about everything.
Yeah.
Not just printing presses.
No, right. So the printery had all but shut down in Brooklyn. No, by the time I got there, it was shut down. There were literally skeletons of the printing press throughout the factory.
Wow.
I lived in the building that was attached to the factory, so I walked past it every single day. And I remember growing up, I grew up in New York State, so I was down at Bethel all the time. So I remember seeing these things moving in Brooklyn. And so to see it, not be there was pretty crazy. I remember watching well, he's deceased, I'm gonna say his name. Max Larson do the ceremonial shutting off of the printing press on the final day of printing in Brooklyn. I vividly remember that picture. I wasn't there for it, but I remember that picture being a part of our like archives and all that stuff. And just so you know, I delved into JW history, hard body, before going to Bethel and while I was at Bethel. It was one of my nerdiest of hobbies. So it thrilled me, and I love that kind of stuff. So, to live amongst the history that I was reading was pretty amazing. And so I got there during the GB direction where Theodore Jarris was still alive, Barr was still alive, Pierce was still alive.
So what year is this?
07.
07, okay.
Wrong. 09. 09. So I got there then. Again, no JW broadcasting had started. Patterson had completed. People were being moved around like crazy. The first mass exodus of Bethelites had been, asked to return to the field, as it were. They also, so I'm not even saying, so again, I was not privy to any, direction or anything like that. I didn't work in those departments. But
Sure.
when you're amongst the family and you have, you're literally sitting, eating there at the table with them, you're seeing them every day. You know these things. It's just family business. So when they did say, a major reason why we were leaving Brooklyn is because the printing presses didn't fit, it sounds trivial and stupid and little, but that is one of the main reasons. You don't have to be part of the board meeting to realize, oh no, well, we're going to have to switch things up. So then what are we using Brooklyn for? So it was kind of like, well, these things are just taking up space. At the time that I was there, we still had 30 buildings that we just were not even occupying, just sitting there. So you're sitting on a gold mine, and you're in Brooklyn Heights, New York. You're sitting on a gold mine of real estate. And and they had been for years, but it was one of those things where when I got the call to go to Brooklyn, I was like, why am I going to Brooklyn?
Yeah, I was going to ask, why are you being called up when they're letting other people go?
Right. Well, I was young. They are always going to need 19-year-old boys to do work.
Okay,
So
that's what it is then.
yeah, that was the main reason. And so when also you come and you have that history, you come highly recommended by your every brother that you ever seen, your circuit overseers, your elders. They're gonna be like, okay, you're gonna come here and we're gonna put you through the Bethel program. You're gonna come at 1920. We're gonna have you work in a new boy department, laundry, food service, building services. And then we're gonna move you on to service department, legal, something else. That's how these guys get made. It helps with the indoctrination. It strengthens your loyalty to the
Sure.
organization, and you move on, mindlessly just moving through. So that was part of the program. My independent thinking never changed. I was an independent thinker from 13 on. So when I got there, the biggest issue that I had was the same issue that I had when I was 13, 14 years old. Independent thinking that they strongly discourage, even more so when you're at Bethel. It's actually in writing
Yeah,
at
you mean just
Bethel.
thinking, right?
So a spirit of independence is what they call it.
Yeah. I
So,
remember that. But it's just
so
thinking. You're
right.
supposed to think. Jehovah gave you a brain.
So by and large, my very first 3 months at Bethel were fun. You're with people who have gone through the same sacrifices you made to get there.
Mm-hmm.
You're having a blast because you're living on donated funds in New York City, the biggest city in the country, one of the best cities in the world. And you're having a blast. I was out of my parents' house. I just wanted so badly to get out of that house. So I finally was able to do it, and they couldn't say otherwise. They couldn't discourage me from leaving because I was going to live alone and the devil would come. No, I was going to Bethel, so finally I'm independent that way.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a blast that first year, because you had the best of every world you could have, really. It's was hard because the work was just hard. The routine was crazy hard. No one says Bethel's easy. It's not because of only the workload. It's also because of the people load. You just now put yourself into a concentrated, unadulterated indoctrination, and everyone around you is judging you. You are guilty until proven innocent when you walk in those doors. If you're 19, 20 years old, they look at you like you are nothing. You've probably lied on your application. You are just a little shit, masturbator, whatever. That's all they really view you as when you get there. You have to prove yourself out of that. So, challenge accepted for a lot of us. We just went there and said, yeah, okay, that's what you think of me. Then let me show you. So you're going hard. You're going hard. They would equate your work ethic to your devotion to Jehovah. How do you think Jehovah thinks about the job that you did today? Is a question they would ask if you had to get pulled aside because you did a bad job on something. So the mind fuck continues. You're there. You're already good for nothing. But because you have this Bethelite on your forehead, they know what people think about you and the organization. So they're going to make sure that you don't think anything about yourself.
Yeah, because Bethelites were celebrated. I mean, every time I knew of a young person who went, there was a big send-off, a big party. It was glorified.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, a lot of them ended up with the big head.
Yeah. And in order to not have that big head, so there's an acceptable big head and there's a non-acceptable big head. If you have a big head because you are doing everything right, you tell on your friends, you do everything they tell you to do, they don't really care too much about your big head. If you have a big head just because you're a Bethelite and you think you're a shit, They don't like that.
Gotcha.
So they try to squash that. But in so doing, you're squashing down people who are sincere, who come
Mhm.
there and they really want to do a good job. A lot of guys literally crying because if I get sent home because I didn't do a good job at Bethel, then it's gonna look bad on me. And the stress
The
gets,
shame of
oh my
returning
gosh.
home from Bethel.
And it's not even for anything wrong. You
Yeah,
just didn't do the work that
sure.
well. Um, it was crazy mental anguish. Like I felt really bad for the guys that struggled to do the work, the labor of it all. You have to get to a point in your head where you can just survive. And it's really just surviving. You're not thriving there mentally. You are just surviving. You are trying to get up every morning. And depending on your job, you may not have enough sleep. Very likely you don't have enough sleep. Um, so, you know, all these people there, you're going to have people problems.
Can I ask, well, yeah, we'll get to that in just a second. How long are you working at Bethel? Like, what are these work days? Are these 12, 14, 16-hour work
So
days?
it depends. So I think they follow labor laws as far as your actual job assignment. So your job technically starts from 8 o'clock in the morning to, I think it was 5 o'clock at night. Yeah, 5 o'clock at night with a 1 hour break for lunch. And then you have two 15-minute breaks. So that's the official eight to five. But the reality of it is because the Bethel rule is a Bethel way, they call it. You're up at 6 o'clock. You're expected at morning. At the time when I was there, they've changed so much.
Sure.
When I was there, you expected at the morning worship table at 7 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. You must be there. You go from there straight to work usually. 8 o'clock, you work all the way through. And then after that, if you are not on a meeting night, like you go to the Kingdom Hall for a meeting afterwards, you have no doubt some studying. During your first year, you have to study for entrance school. Entrance school is every Monday, unless there's a special talk for after Watchtower study. So just give you a Monday routine. Monday routine, you're up at 6 in the morning. If you're a new Bethelite, then you have to go to entrance school. So that means you're probably up even earlier that just to study for the session that night. So you're at 6, 5 o'clock in the morning. Morning worship at 7 o'clock. 8 o'clock, you had work until 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock, you go to Watchtower study. After Watchtower study was, I think, like 6:30 or something like that. I can't remember exactly. After Watchtower study, this is a Monday, then you have your 1 hour session for Bethel Entrance School. So yeah, then you go back home, start the whole day over again the next day. On a meeting night, same deal. You don't get out early just because it's your meetings. Now you got to go all of that, then go to your meeting. So you lived and breathed this. This was your life. This wasn't an experience. This is who you are. This is what you do. And it's a constant moving. You don't have time to think. So anything that does come across that you see that doesn't seem right, you're just like, oh, well, whatever. This has to get done. Next deadline, next deadline, next deadline. And when I went home the first time, my dad looked at me, he was like, what is with you? I'm like, I just can't turn my brain off. I can't relax without thinking about what is the next thing I have to do. It's like I have, and then, what time do I have to leave out of here to get back home on time so that I can be there on time so that I can produce this for them at this time. It's constant.
Hypervigilance and workaholism, it sounds like.
Ooh. And then you have people. So then the people, now they all bring their personalities to the table. I didn't even know it was possible to have this many personalities to the table. It was crazy. I'm like, is no one the same? Can we come to some sort of consensus about, what we all like to do, or if there's something that we're okay with? It's such a toxic environment because you find your way to cope with all the rules. And if your way to cope with all the rules bends the rules a little bit, everybody has their own favorite rule they like to break. But you find out that somebody breaks a rule that you like to keep, then you judge that other person for that. It's a constant battle between you did this and I did this, but I'm not going to say anything to the right people, but you should stop doing it. It's a constant battle of that. If you survive years and years at Bethel, it's because you found a way to, we used to say, the shadiest people are the most successful people at Bethel because they are able to keep their stuff to themselves, either without getting caught or just not, being too out there. You find your way to keep it to yourself so that others don't judge you for it. And then you try not to get into any disagreements too much because everybody's going to pull everybody's shit out when that happens. But again, all these people there, you're going to have people problems. Every problem that you have in the world, you have there. Fighting, physical or verbal, domestic violence, alcoholism, people cheating on their spouses. It's all there. It all happens there. None of that shocked me. And as a matter of fact, I had known about that before I even went in. Everyone always said, we go to Bethel, we hang out with these guys, and they think they're the worst of us all. But it's true. It's true. We would take liberties that we would never do before. And even when my parents came to visit the first time, my dad kind of had a little conversation with me. He was like, there's people that say, when you go to Bethel, you may try things that you may not have tried when you were back home because you're away from home. My answer to that was, yeah, that's true. And that was it. But yeah, you got to have some sort of fun. You justify it like hell because you're working your ass off. So fuck cares if I decide to drink a little too much today.
I know there's always been a drinking culture there.
Oh yeah, major drinking culture. People were making it. People will teach you how to make it. That's just how it was. I started drinking there. I've never been into alcoholism or anything like that, or never had a problem with alcoholism, I should say.
Sure.
But I don't even like drinking like over the limit either. I enjoy drinking. I don't follow the rules of when you should drink. I would drink at 6 a.m. I'll drink at 6 p.m. I'll drink on holiday or not, but that's only because I don't really have a vice for it. I understand if people have a vice for it, that it needs to be more regulated. But yeah, for me, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the taste of it. I was pretty particular. And I hung out with people who like that. So, I had a good amount of friends, a good friend group. Great relationship with my roommates. I had two. They were awesome. The first guy was great. Second guy was great. Super chill. I had issues with people that I worked with. If you wanted to be stumbled out of the organization, go to Bethel. Because you're gonna be if you are that kind of a minded person. I don't want to say a weak-minded person, but if you are not sure about the organization and you're looking for a reason to leave, go to Bethel. You're gonna find it.
So you're saying that people there are very are they harsh? Are they just they believe they've got the right way to do something, and so they might put you down for not doing it that way? Like what because I'm thinking, in any organization, any corporation, any company, the people who are the most narcissistic often end up rising because they'll do what they need to do. They have no problem keeping up appearances. They have no problem shutting things down and saying what's on their mind and making sure they get what they want.
Yeah.
And so I'm just sitting here thinking, like, you have a lot of people who are going there who've all been hurt in their own ways, and they've all been through a lot, and so they've just gotten to this point where they're at this thing. They know how to keep up appearances. They know how to make sure that they keep their head down and do their work. They know how to maybe speak up for what they want at times. Is it just a lot of that? And so you've got maybe like a lot of really hard driving type A type people who are there.
you got that amongst people who don't give a fuck.
Who's so narcissistic? They don't care about anybody.
Yes.
Okay.
And you got that is such a huge clash. They used to always say 50% of the people here are here to test the other 50% of the people that are there. We used to say that. We used to say that all the time. You ask a Bethelite, what's your favorite part about Bethel? They'll say the people. Then you ask them, what's your least favorite part about Bethel? They'll say the people. Same breath, same sentence. Because that's true.
If you'd like some extra content, if you'd like to learn more about our guests today, maybe even have an opportunity to connect further with them, you can do so by joining the back room tier at patreon.com/shunned.
You have a clash and a constant back and forth between your Bethelites that you work with, and there is no real solution to that. So that was the major source of strife, I would say, that I had with Bethel. And in and of itself, it was just a constant badgering of, you're not doing it my way, so I'm going to make your life a living hell. And you can get that from someone who is in oversight or someone who is your neighbor. It doesn't matter. So I didn't necessarily like that part of it. As far as everything else, I loved it. I loved the regimented life. I didn't mind the checkpoints. I didn't mind having to check in with someone. I didn't mind any of that. Didn't mind the strict rules, none of that. I found my way to get through with that, and that was fine. There was clearly hypocrisy. There was clearly things that I thought were unnatural, meaning like, people should not be treated like this. People should not be thinking this way. People should be able to express their opinions, all that. So you find your tribe, you stick to your tribe, and you survive together. Ultimately, why I left Bethel is because my sexuality got brought up again. You're in the epicenter of gay witnesses. There's a ton of gay.
They're all there trying to cope by going hard at the worship of Jehovah in the highest way, trying to earn his love.
Yeah. I, just for the record, like, all, a lot of people are saying, oh, you should read Crisis of Conscience, stuff like that. I personally, I have listened to it on the Audible of Crisis of Conscience. And when I was listening to it, I was just kind of thinking, this just sounds like Monday morning. Like, it didn't sound like anything really special, because I'm like, yeah, it's a corporation. This is what it does what it does. And none of that stuff pushed me out of the organization. It didn't even make me question whether or not it was the truth, as they called it. It just kind of made it seem like, oh, there's people running this thing, and yeah, people are gonna people. Didn't make me think it was a cult. None of that. So my experiences at Bethel were mostly just like, I don't have to deal with this. Not only am I still in the closet, but now I got to deal with your idiot ass. I don't want to do that. But I had come to a point where I was like, I'm also not going to let somebody take this away from me. If I love it, I'm going to stay. I don't care about anybody else. End up staying for about 3.5 years. My last year there, in the middle of the fourth year, I was like, okay, the sexuality thing is happening again. I was about 23 years old. I said, it's coming up. Why was it coming up? Oh, I was not dating. I was talking to a girl. And I was head over heels for her. I really wanted to be with her. And then she got disfellowshipped out of nowhere. And so that was it. Never talked to her again. That kind of went like a downward spiral for me mentally, because I was like, dang, I had it in my hand. I could have, but I didn't.
That must have been really tough, though, knowing that you have other sexual feelings that are not accepted, and you had someone that you probably thought was going to be that you cared about, but also was going to be the solution to some degree.
Yeah.
To this, these internal feelings that Jehovah's Witnesses don't accept.
Yeah. And I will say for the record, I never ever thought that being with a woman, even if I was attracted to her 100%, was going to take away my attraction to men.
Oh, that's a thing that Jehovah's Witnesses say, though.
Yeah, I was going to be bisexual for the rest of my life, except that
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was
yeah,
good
yeah,
with
yeah.
that. And I would eventually probably even told my wife
Sure.
if we got serious before getting married, I would have told her, "Hey, so just so you know, I'm bi, like
Right.
just so you know that."
But you would have had something, the only acceptable relationship.
Right, exactly. And that had come up a couple times. There was sisters, women who I was into, um, but and I would say I wasn't really, I wasn't incredibly like sexually driven. Like I'm just not that kind of a person. But
Mhm.
yeah, so I was even okay with being celibate until the New World. I was okay with that. Um, but I sure as hell did not want that in the New World at all to be an issue. But yeah, during Bethel, especially at that time, so that was the thing too. When it comes to at least my sexuality, if I'm going to be interested in a woman, the man part's going to be there. Being interested in a man, it's going to
Sure.
be there. So if I'm shutting it off, period, it's shut off for both sexes. And when I reopen it because I'm going to be interested in this woman, then both are reopened. So that's why I have to be very focused on whoever I'm with because that's just
Sure.
how it's going to be. But I believe in loyalty even now to this day. I would not ever cheat on anybody that I'm with. So at the time, because all of everything was reopened, then now I'm having to fight getting this guy back in the cage again because we got to refocus. But Bethel had taken its toll on me. I was tired of dealing with people. They were now shifting. They had now come out and just said to everybody else, we're moving out of Brooklyn entirely. So then it was a huge push to build Warwick, shut down Brooklyn. That was our job. And so I had been told that I was going to be going to Warwick. I had been told that I was going to continue to move on in the organization. And that was kind of the track. The branch committee had been looking at me and they wanted to move me on. So they wanted me to stay. I had had a slip up according to JW standards while I was at Bethel, and they allowed me to stay before this year. So, but after that, it was just a constant struggle. I was still fighting to stay there and fighting to keep the um, moral expectations high. Um, so, and just to clarify, I was a virgin until I left the organization. In every way that they view it. So I finally went to the elders and told them, listen, I'm dealing with, I'm bisexual and this is, how I'm feeling. I'm dealing with this. I would like help. I did this at Bethel and had never told anyone that, did not want to tell anyone that. I just had a conscience that was going crazy. And I was like, I just need to I need to move on. The pressure of a bad conscience at Bethel, because of what their lofty, unattainable, unnatural standards are, is so crushing to a young man that, yes, there have been occasionally guys who have unalived themselves. Every so often, very seldomly did we get an announcement that so and so had died. He was 23, 25, whatever. And we were like, what the fuck happened? And no one ever, it's a suicide when no one knows or no one gives you a straight answer. Oh, he had an underlying health issue. It was an underlying heart attack or an underlying heart issue that he didn't know he had. That was believable. We would get that sometimes. Very seldomly, we would get a guy who that actually did happen to. or an acute sickness that just came out of nowhere. People had no problems telling you that when that happened. If someone had committed suicide, it was an automatic divert. Don't say exactly what it was. So I would say there were 2 occasions while I was there that had happened. And then a lot of times when guys deal with the pressure, they just leave. Literally pack their shit up and leave. They don't say anything to anybody. They know they fucked up something, and they're just packing their shit up and they're going. They don't want to get this fellowship from Bethel because the humiliation from Bethel is even worse than the congregation, because you're at Bethel, it's morning worship. You have morning worship. End of morning worship. One final announcement before we let the family go to work. So-and-so is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses and left Bethel at XYZ time. Let's say a prayer and go to work. That's literally how it is. So imagine the conditioning of your drone-like state where, let's say it's a friend. I did have a friend who that happened to. What happened to this guy? We haven't heard from him in a while. Oh, okay. Was there an announcement? No. Next week there's an announcement. That's his name. Ocean. Oh, what the hell? Nobody knows anything. Stay the course. Okay. You never mentally deal with it. Maybe you'll see him again. Maybe you won't. But this guy who you just worked with every single day for the last rigorous however long you've been there is now gone. No contact, nothing. Move on with your life.
Detach.
So that's unhealthy and unnatural. You don't realize that until after you leave. Didn't like that. But I dealt with it and kept it moving. So I'm dealing with my own shit. Come out to the brothers while I was there. And I told them, listen, I don't care what has to happen. I said, but I can't stay here anymore. I need to go back home to where I know people. I need to go back home to where I can refocus. I need to go refocus because I don't want to fall out of the truth. So they said, well, don't make any concrete plans. We'll talk to the branch committee about everything. Da, da, da. And I was like, I've already got my job interviews lined up. I'm out of here. So I left, went back home, and that was tough being back in the house. It was like being a teenager again. I just wanted to leave. I didn't have any money because you don't get paid when you're at Bethel. So I'm like, I just got to get a job and get the hell out of this house because it was literally like being a teenager again.
What can I ask? What was it like when you said, "Hey, mom and dad, I'm coming back home"? How were you? What was the response to that, or the response maybe of the home congregation you were going back to?
People were excited. They were happy to come back home. That I was coming back home. We had a slew of guys that had gone to Bethel and literally wrecked their lives. So it was kind of like, uh-oh, is he another one of these guys? But it wasn't necessarily like that. I went back home. People were happy to see me again. Home was very different than when I left. And then, me and my dad had a conversation before I went back home over the phone, and he didn't ask me anything. He didn't ask me what happened. He didn't ask me anything. He just said, well, home is here for you. We're here for you when you get back. And my dad has changed so much. After I became an adult, he has changed tremendously. And like I said, I think a lot of it had to do with the pressure of getting someone who he had one in custody court up to adulthood.
Sure.
I feel like after that,
A lot of pressure on witness parents to control those kids to make sure that they turn out the way they are expected to turn out.
Yeah. I felt like for him, the pressure was a lot of pressure was off. And so, no, he had to, the new pressure of being an empty nester and, how are you going to be in an empty house now? It's just you and the wife now, you figure it out. So that was, something new that they were dealing with, but both of them were happy to have me home. No questions asked, nothing. So then I got back home, and I don't think we never discussed how it would be as an adult being back in the house. So we just picked up where we left off. But when we left off, I wasn't a real adult. I just graduated high school, graduated college, and, you know, gone to Bethel. So there was no, how do we move on with 3 adults in the house? It was more so you're back living with your parents. They're going to treat you like, well, at least my dad is going to treat you like a teenager. So figure it out. And it caused some strife. Took a couple times for us to get it right. And then we got it right. We hit our stride and it was great. Loved living back home as an adult. It was great. When we got to the point where, you know, I was, eventually my parents left our hometown. So at that point we had to physically split, but we didn't want to. We didn't want to have to live away from each other. It was very good. They were on trips. I was on trips. I'd have the house to myself. They would have the house. It was just great. Mutual respect. So what ended up happening was I got bored with being back home again. I just didn't. I had, you know, gotten back up spiritually. I was ministerial servant, regular pioneering in Russian Field, doing public talks here and there. And then I said, I'm bored doing this. Let's go. Let's go somewhere else. I said, let's try to go back to Bethel. I said, let me try to go back to Bethel now. Try to find the circumstances to go back full time. Didn't work out. So then I said, let me see if I can start commuting. Warwick had just finished up. Brooklyn was completely sold. And, you know, they were looking at the next best thing. So commuter work was hopping. So it was like, go be a commuter and make it happen. So I said, okay. But I was completely unenamored with Bethel. I never wanted to go back full time again. And so I said, well, let me at least get in the area, do some good in the field, in the local area, and then apply for commuter work when I get the chance. I was not in any rush to go back to Bethel in any capacity. But when you come back, now you have 2 languages under your belt. You're an elder. You're close to 30 years old. Now they can start to use you for oversight and whatever else. It was more of an opportunity to be used. And when I went down to commute, it was a constant pressure to reapply as a regular Bethelite. And I said, I'm not doing that. And they did not like that. It was just constant. They're like, what do you need? Well, what's the problem? Well, what can we do to make it easier? Or, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I just was like, no, I'm sick of being poor. I don't want to go back and doing that. So I'm just going to commute. But of course, when you start commuting, it's just in your face. Literally, you're right there. Come back, come back, come back. And like, I'm not coming back.
So when you commute, how often are you going?
You can go, depending on your circumstances, you can go every day. But
and were you going to Brooklyn, or they moved and you were going somewhere else?
So I was at Walk Hill.
Oh, you're at Walk Hill. Okay.
Yeah. So being at Walk Hill, so I was in my specialized trade, and so that's what they pulled me into. I was working as often as I was able to work. And I had no real set schedule. The only thing they asked is that I call my overseer before I go in. So I had that kind of leeway. And then that's when I started to see more things. So I mentioned before, when I went back home, I became an elder at 27. You're 27 years of age. And that's when you become an elder, you immediately are pretty much read in on what the policy on CSA is. And I thought to myself, okay, standard procedure, whatever. Every school, every special elders meeting, you're going to hit on CSA, what the new policy changes are. What are we doing with it? And I'm like, to myself, I'm thinking, okay, I get that we have this issue, but like, we're not the Catholic Church. So why are we even discussing it like this? But then I served 4 congregations as an elder, and every congregation it comes up. either someone is a victim or someone has victimized or something like that. And I'm just like, what is going on? Why does this keep coming up? And you're not told how prevalent of an issue it is. You're never told about the cases that are ongoing. You're not told that they're um, settling out of court these cases. You're told this is the policy. This is what happens if you encounter it in your congregations. And the policy was definitely don't feel like you need to contact the authorities if you don't have to. Number one rule, call the branch. They have a department at Bethel that gets calls every single day about a case of CSA. And to the point where the person who picks up the phone at Bethel has to be rotated out so that he's not discouraged. So that's how deep the problem is. But why is it so deep? It was my question. So that was when things really started to change in my head, because I saw from this level that I'm at now that we're not handling something that is actually pretty easy for us to handle just by a policy change. And we keep letting it happen. It's having the opposite effect. And they're doing everything except the right thing with this to circumvent what needs to happen with this. Why does this keep happening? So that was in my head as a turning point. So then as you start to investigate those things, the things that you were putting away also start to come back out. And you're like, starting to feel a little bit weird here. And I don't know what to call it. So again, I'm carrying that up until I get back to Bethel. And while I'm there, Russian congregation responsibilities had gotten more and more overwhelming. COVID happened. I was living by myself. I was very, very tired. We didn't have that many brothers in our congregation who were not full-time Bethelites. So that meant that when COVID happened, a lot fell on me. And it wasn't a very big congregation, but it was enough. So after that happened, I also thought that COVID was it. Because of last of the last of the last of the last of the minutes of the last seconds of the last days.
Final part of the final part of the final part of the last days.
I'm thinking to myself, and to this point, I went and even said a special prayer to Jehovah. I was like, listen, I said, I've done everything that I could do. If you allow me to come into the new world, then great. I said, if there's something that I didn't do, please forgive me. If there's something that I did wrong, please forgive me. Just let me come in. Started to prepare mentally and physically for that. Started to prepare the congregation mentally and physically for the Great Tribulation. Like, this is where we were at. We were like, yeah, we made it. This is it. We did everything we were supposed to do. I was having conversations with friends, do you think we're going back on service ever again? Do you think that we'll ever go back to the Kingdom Hall? And I'm thinking to myself, I think this is it. I mean, they're making it seem like we're that. I said, I think we're done. But then quickly you realize that 2020 was just another 1975. And
it's a lot of things. It's 1975. It's 9/11. It's there's been so many things that have happened over the years. The nuclear reactors after the tsunami and everything in Japan. I mean, there's just every time there's some big major world event, this is it. The war in Iraq. I remember I've been through so many of them myself as a witness. It's just over and over. The ends. This is the one. It's like remember that show Sanford and Son? I don't know if you knew that. And Fred Saber's always, oh, Elizabeth, it's I'm coming to see you. It's like, this is the one, right? And like, it's that's what they do with everything.
I was like, yeah. I said, well, I'm not sure how or what part of prophecy this is, but it happened in the whole
Yeah.
world, so it's got to be. Um, yeah, I remember what had happened. That plane got shot down in Iran. It was an accident by Iran, I think it was. It was a commercial jet and it had Americans on it. I was like, oh shit, this is it. Here we go. And nothing happened. I was like, what? America just forgave that. So I was like, oh, well, I guess we're doing this. We're just gonna keep moving. We started going back to the meetings. I said, you gotta be kidding me. It was literally like somebody told you, oh, you've been working from home the last 4 years, but now you gotta come back to the office. And I was like, hell no. So I was like, I'm not going out for talks anymore. I got very tired of doing that. Because in Russian, it's not like you can just go around the corner. You got to go to another state. You got to take a flight or something. Um, because the circuit is just too vast. And because I had become fluent with it, I was being asked to go out a lot. So I said, okay, I'm just gonna switch congregations. I'm gonna go to Spanish. I learned Spanish when I was in school, in elementary school. We had some Latino relatives here and there. I had picked up Spanish for years. I was pretty good at Spanish in school. I said, you know what? Let me go to Spanish. It'd be cooler there. I really like the Latin culture. And I can probably find a sister that I would really like to settle down with there. So let me just do that. So I switched to Spanish to really take a lot of the pressure off. But I don't know what the universe was doing with me. Because it was just like you went from the mentality of COVID and going from it being the end to now going back into the JW routine, and you're an elder, young single elder, and they're using you like crazy. And I literally wrote to them when I first moved to the congregation that I am not here to do more work. I am here because I need some time to breathe. But that doesn't stop you from having to still do routine things. You still got to give a talk. Like you can't be an elder and do nothing. So I went there and yeah, so it was still a routine elder thing. And because I was a local elder, even though I was um starting to commute, you still get a little bit more congregation activities than you would if you were normal or if you were a regular Bethelite. So I was like, all right, I still had work to do, not a problem. I could at least juggle the little bit that I was getting. However, at that time, I had started to see things in the organization really for what they were. Um, the CSA thing came up in a very big way in that congregation. Um, and I had already had my suspicions about this organization and how they handled CSA. I believed that they were going to eventually take care of it, but no, they were doing everything but fix the problem. When I got to that congregation, it was yeah, so this brother has been accused of XYZ. All right. And what? Like, he's been an elder for how long? And when did this happen? And all of that. So we had to, deal with that. And yeah, I'm not gonna get into all the details,
Sure.
on the public venue, but we had to deal with that. And I was not okay with the way it was handled because the community doesn't know who this person is. We do.
They could Jehovah's Witnesses could just say, "Hey, you know what? This is above our pay grade. This comes up just like if it was murder or any other crime, we report it to the proper authorities."
Right. But they
All
don't.
they have to do.
That's all they have to do.
They'd have to
Now,
let go of control.
yeah. The other issue was this one I can talk a little bit more about. There was a situation in the congregation where someone who had wanted to get reinstated, but they were in another state. So the congregation that they were going to be reinstated in had to contact our body of elders. And then because the person was disfellowshipped from our congregation years ago. No one even knew who this person was. I think there was one member of the elder body who kind of knew who this guy was. And They had given us a laundry list of the things that he had done to get his fellowship, and of course, one of them was molesting a child, a young boy, way back. I think in either the early '90s or late '80s. So I'm thinking to myself, even per witness policy, we have to look into this to make sure it was handled properly. Now I don't know about this. The way it happened was so fast. I got an email about it. We were supposed to meet on it at the next meeting. The meeting, it literally was like a 24-hour turnover period. I got an email. Let's just say I got an email about it on Wednesday. Thursday, we were meeting on it. So I had no time to look at the email. I didn't even know what we were meeting about, because by the time I got to the meeting, I'm like, what is going on? Why are we meeting tonight? Nothing was on the agenda. So a friend of mine was sitting by me. He pulls up the email while we're having the meeting, and I read through the email while we're making a decision as to what is going to happen. And I'm reading this. I'm like, on the list of things that this guy has done, we got molestations on this, so we have to discuss this a little bit further. How do we know that this was handled correctly? We're supposed to talk to the victim if we can and ask them how they would feel about this person being reinstated, regardless of where they are. That's the JW policy. We don't know if this person was ever reported to the authorities. Sure, he wasn't. Especially the further back you get in JW, nah, definitely not. And then this person was in a state that had an ongoing trials with CSA. So, we can't just brush this part over. Our job as an elder body at that time was to appoint a reinstatement committee, and we were just supposed to say, we agree this person should be reinstated, or no, we disagree, this person should still be disfellowshipped. And we were going to just appoint a judicial reinstatement committee of 3 or more elders to decide that. Again, no one on the body even knew who this person was. And he's trying to get back into a community of minor children in some state congregation that we don't even know about.
Hey, you not only don't know who he was, you don't know who he is.
Right. It
all.
happened so fast.
Right.
It happened so fast. We appointed the guys who were going to make the final decision and send the letter down to the congregation. They had to make the announcement in both congregations that this guy was reinstated. They did the announcement in our congregation, and of course, at this time, clapping after a reinstatement announcement was allowed. So the congregation's clapping for this individual, and they don't even know who this man is. And I just sat there thinking to myself, what the fuck are we doing here? And it didn't stop there. So I'm going on about CSA. And I think for someone like myself who was never a victim of it, but now having to deal with these things, be in the position I was in, it was actually a little bit harder for me to really grasp this, because in my mind, I had come up into an organization that has saved me, that has saved my family, that had put me in a position to be better in life than a lot of my peers. And it was special to me. And then we have this very dark mark on our organization that I loved so much. And I care a lot about my siblings. I care a lot about my niece. I care a lot about my friends' kids. I want to have children. This, to me, shouldn't have been a hard thing. And then when I start to realize, if someone came to me and said that they had been victimized in this way, and then we did the JW policy and nothing happened to their perpetrator, and the victim decides to leave the organization, now we shun them. The perpetrator is still giving talks.
Yep.
That's kind of one of the big moments for me where I was like, that is not God directed. I don't care what anybody says. That is not God directed. And that's a big mistake that the organization has made. And I said, well, how big is this issue? Because at that time, I still didn't know. We had gone through 2. This was the second CSA case. So the other one, again, I can't really speak that much on, but both of them in one congregation, less than 1 year. Okay, so if this is how it is, let's just do the quick math. How many congregations are there? How many elder bodies are there? How many people in this organization? So
Those are the ones you know about.
those are the ones we know about, right? So I'm like, okay, hold on a minute. This is weird. Like, this is, things are starting to get a little weird. It was then, I would say, okay, yep. So it was then the same time that I was still commuting at Bethel. Realized that nothing had really changed at Bethel. People were still the same, if not worse, after COVID. And then there were other questions that were coming up because of the way that the organization handled COVID, which I had no problem with, personally. But I also didn't have any health concerns. But for people who did have health concerns, that they didn't like the fact that they had to be vaccinated in order to be, go to Pioneer School or to go to the meetings or things like that. So I understand that now. But people were starting to have major doubts about the organization because of the way it handled COVID. But that for me was not the thing. The thing for me was, one, you told us now this is the last 7 days and we're still here. 2, this CSA issue is now coming up again and again and again, and it's getting more severe. Norway hits. Norway and Morris was still in at the time. Norway hits, and I'm like, hey, what is this? Like, why are they saying that they're going to remove our religious status or whatever? And then the organization doesn't really speak about that. So even when I was in, I was like, well, what are they saying on the other end? What is Norway saying about this? So let me just look this up real quick. Nothing apostate came up when I did that. I just looked at the news. And I'm like, okay, so they're saying that it's inhumane what we're doing and it violates their human rights laws. Check. Had no idea how far that was going to go. So after that, then things started to shift because Morris was removed. And I thought to myself, okay, that's never happened in my lifetime. That doesn't just happen. So just like it was unnatural for us to move on with life when one of our friends got disfellowshipped and not know if we were ever going to see them again, it was even more unnatural when you have this man who is a leader in the organization because he is a member of the governing body, now has this major deletion, removal, whatever, and we're supposed to just move on like everything is okay. And I'm back
Didn't
at
they
Bethel.
appoint 2 people to replace him?
I don't know if they did that for sure, and that's the reason why he was removed, but that did happen at the same time. So that was
That's
not
what I thought. I was wondering if
Yep.
they were stacking the deck voting wise in some way, or
And which I found out is what they do. I don't
Mhm.
know if that's why that happened.
Sure.
But it wasn't until after that then the big changes started, and I had already left by then. But
I don't think old Tony Morris would have gone for the
No.
pants changes.
No.
And the things.
No. And yeah, we loved Uncle Tony, and we really did. He was a blast. We thought he was hilarious. We laughed at the stuff he said. No one was following him, but it's also unnatural to have your uncle just leave the family, so you kind of want to know what's going on. I didn't need to know what happened. I just didn't like the response. We're not drones, people. We have feelings. Let's just feel about this for a second. Let's talk about it audibly. What does that mean for us? How do we move forward? For you to not address it, except just put a little blurb on the website, that insults us. We're
It was
members
only
of
up there for a short period of time before they took it back down.
You insult us as members of this figurative family to just throw that on us and say, deal with it. Say something about it and then we're going to deal with you. And then you start questioning all the work that we're doing. He worked years. He has non-witness relatives. His kid is in it. His kids are in it. He's built his whole family life about this, and now he's gone. What the hell do they care about any one of us?
Did you
All
even
this
know
religion.
he was? Is it the same for you, where you just basically find out through a blurb that, like, just poof, he's gone, and
Mhm.
and you didn't know that that was even a potentiality at the time?
Yeah, we always have been told that no one is above the law. But the likelihood that a governing body member would not be serving, you literally would, if he was on his, Barr was on his deathbed, Jairus was on his deathbed, all of these members had died before in their station.
True.
Hurd is going to die the same way. He's old. He doesn't want to go to work anymore. All due respect to him, I had no problems with him. But as much as he doesn't necessarily want to do a lot of the work or maybe going along with things, he's going to die in very much the same way. You knew something was off because there was a shift in the Bethel family. And it wasn't a I'm going to follow Morris shift. No, no one was doing that. It was a okay, what are we doing here type thing. Um, First you got COVID, you got this 2020 BS, you got Morris disappearing, and we're supposed to just move on with life. Like, this is natural. Just forget about everybody else. Just focus on
Just
you.
like Morris was the guy working next to you as a Bethelite, and suddenly he's gone,
And I was
and
gone.
you just act like you just move on with your work and act like he never existed.
Yeah. So it was weird. I did not like the response to that. I thought it was insulting to my intelligence, to, my humanity. And I started to see the organization very differently. I said, we're all just drones following along thoughtlessly because we're afraid. And no one wants to talk about anything of substance because it could really affect their culture. It could affect their community. And so then I started to realize this is not just a religion. This is a culture. And this is something that I had said once before when I was younger. I remember being out in service with a good friend of mine. And I said, we have, this is more than just a religion. This is our own culture. And she paused for a second. She looked at me and she was like, well, we don't want to put it like that. And I didn't know why she said that, but it made sense now because it's a cult. It's a cult, and we knew we didn't know what we were doing until you leave. You're like, oh shit, we're in a cult. So that then opened the floodgates. Um, at the time too, I was looking for a mate. That was not going well at all. And then, of course, like I said in the outset before we started, I had met this guy, and we were very, very close, very, very fast, and we never did anything, physical. It just was a clear mutual understanding that we had found each other to be. I'm trying to say this. I don't want to throw him on the bus. We had just found each other to be what each other needed at the time, and then it was great. But again, he was very serious about what he wanted to do in the organization, and we decided, to move on. And so that's what ended up happening. But none of that was never, my sexuality was never a deciding factor as to whether or not I stayed a witness, because I knew who I was the entire time. I've been bisexual my entire life from birth. So it wasn't even a factor. And even when I finally told my family I was leaving, that was not even, it was barely one of the reasons why I put it in there. I just said, "Oh, by the way, I'm bisexual. I just want you to know so you don't get shocked if I wind up with a guy." And that was it. But that wasn't one of the reasons why I listed why I left. It did make things harder, but I had already figured out how to move on with my life. So yeah, I started to watch news about the organization, secular news. I started to ask certain people questions, and everyone, I hate this. I hated this. When I started to tell people I was leaving, they were like, well, we could have helped you. I said, you don't understand. I said, I've already been talking to you about this. You don't realize that we've had these conversations. And actually, when I was trying to get help to understand what this organization was doing and where we're headed, and if this was God, your responses were useless. So it wasn't like, what were you going to do to help? I would have had to come out to you, and I would have had to tell you I'm thinking about leaving in order for you to actually help me. And even in that instance, you would have gone running to the elders and made matters 10 times worse and said, hey, this
They
elder
would
is
have helped you
talking.
by kicking you out.
Right. This elder just talked to me about some apostate, whatever. I think he's an apostate. Like, what were you going to do to help?
Yeah, there is no help.
No. Mind you, I had gone to the elders to help with my sexuality before, and it was useless. So yeah, I already know. And being an elder, you also know you're not professional, nothing. So when people come to you, what are you gonna do? I had decided that I was gonna leave. All those things were just sparks and pushes for me to investigate more. Came across the ARC upon my investigation of the organization from the outside looking in. That blew my effing mind. I was like, we're talking about just Australia. I was done from that. And so then I said, well, there's got to be more here. There's got to be more here. And there was a lot more there. The doctrine I had never thought about. Never thought about the doctrine until after I left. When I started to investigate the doctrine and, finding out that 1914 was made up, and then, they tried to pull back on 1975. That is something that also, while I was in that, I was like, why are you acting like you didn't say this? I was always in that Bethel library.
Part of the gaslighting.
I said,
We
why
didn't
you
say it. You people just ran with something. You got it in your head.
Come on. I mean, in 10 years, 20 years from now, they're going to pull Let's video off of the broadcast.
Deny.
He never said that. He never said it was a last.
A lot of denial in the truth.
No. I said, I'm smart enough for this to know that you guys are trying to pull a game. They sent the CEOs out. I remember one of the months I decided I was going to go. The CEOs had gone out and had given a talk about doubts. It's just like, are we hemorrhaging people? Like, is this what's happening? People are starting to realize what this is and say, I'm done. Found ex-JW Reddit, and then there was just floodgates from there. I started to listen to. I still wouldn't allow myself necessarily to listen to like, or read, bona fide apostate whatevers. And I'm like, I'm not there yet. And then so I started to investigate other cults. Mormon stories was a huge thing for me. Listening to them. Then I started to investigate the origins. We knew the origins. I had known the origins of the organization. But one of the biggest things for me was JWs, Mormons, and Seventh-day Adventists all came from the same origin. And then they just split off.
Yeah, I have a Seventh-day Adventist whose episode will be going out prior to yours in the queue. So I interviewed a former Seventh-day Adventist about that. So yeah.
That was huge for me. I was like, they all came from the same foundation. And then they just took it and ran with it. Yep. And then you start to compare the timelines of things. The Bible was found at this point, but then you had these Eastern Asian religions that were founded before. People were moving on when Jesus came along. When Jesus came along, where did he go at this point in his life? And where did he come from? Where did he get that from? It just a lot of stuff just was like, I thought that the Bible was it. I thought this is what we're going to live our life off of, and we're right about it completely. I had to realize that we were not special. I have been told literally that the world revolves around JWs. Um, and I believed that. And I thought, well, yeah, of course, that makes sense. We have the truth. All the prophecy you're talking about, yeah, that's right. Um, the simple fact that they thought that the Holocaust happened because that's where a lot of anointed people were. That is such a slap in the face to all those poor Jewish people that died
Yeah, I
during the
think
Holocaust.
I did a whole episode on. I think I did. Yeah, I did something on how I went to this Holocaust museum in St. Louis and just how my mind was blown. Not that I didn't know it was primarily about the Jews, right?
Hmm.
But I just saw on one of the plaques there how many Jehovah's Witnesses had died. And again, every life lost in that is a tragedy and very sad.
Yeah.
But what a nothing burger in comparison with all of the other humans who, I mean, it was like 1,500 versus, 7 million Jews and hundreds of thousands of gay men or, um, uh, yeah, other ethnicities. I'm struggling to remember the name right now, so I'll just go other ethnicities
Hmm.
that were also persecuted and killed. Jehovah's Witnesses. I just remember growing up, the purple triangle and all the imagery of the Holocaust and stuff. I was like, oh, well, that was clearly largely about us, and it's going to
Yeah.
be again in the future. No, it was never about us. What
I oh man, dude. I when I saw it, I was like, yo, I remember again, I was a huge JW history buff. I was like, oh man, that was one of my most cherished themes. Like I literally, I was going in on that, you know?
Then you went and read did you read the Rutherford letters where he was
Oh my
buddying up
gosh.
to Hitler and
Oh my gosh, man. I was like I
crazy.
was disappointed in the organization. I was
Yeah.
disappointed in the organization because I thought we were better than that. Um so I looked into that. The 144,000 math just wasn't working. I just and then another thing too I thought was different was I thought that the generations teaching, the current one that they have, was the first time they ever taught that. I didn't realize that this is something that we have been revamping through the
Hmm.
years.
Every
Um,
time it doesn't work out.
yeah, and they're gonna have to fix that again. So
Hmm.
I was very confused by that. Um, because it didn't make sense. The math definitely doesn't math at all. Um, so yeah, it was a lot of those things, coupled with everything else that I had always said. Jehovah's Witnesses, the stereotype was Jehovah's Witnesses break up families. No, they don't. Jesus said he was going to bring uh, uh, a sword between
Hmm.
brother and sister. Da, 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 da. So I thought, okay, that's wrong. They do break up families. They broke up my family. This is how this organization works.
Yeah.
So I started to blame the organization for it. I started not just that. Once I got done with the organization, I started to blame religion, period. Um, the Bible, this belief that this is the secret code to life. No, I abandoned that. When I started, so when I left, um, I just told the elders that I had no personal issues with them. I just wanted to um, get through some things mentally. Uh, and I didn't want to be bothered. And I was going to stop all congregation activities
All at
uh,
once?
all at once. Um,
Wow.
uh, I had been prepping my family a little bit for about a year. I was like, hey, look, so I'm probably going to be scaling back a little bit. I'm not going to be doing that much. Then I got to a point where I was just like, I need to stop serving as an elder. Um, and then I told them, listen, I'm not doing any congregation or field service activities anymore. On that note, I've always hated every single second of field service my entire life. Never liked a single nanosecond of it. Hated it. All through pioneering, all of it. Every part of it, every avenue, hated every second of it. Um, and that, yeah, so then I told them, basically like I'm done with field service, I'm done with going to meetings. I said I may go to a memorial, and that's it going forward. But after I left, I started to look at religion. I had also started working at a university. I realized that was the JW view on universities was also false, and a scare tactic. They were the nicest people I'd ever met. The students that I worked with were so respectful. They were incredibly intelligent, and they were all trying to help people. They came from very good families. Some of them were religious, some were not. None of them ever tried to tempt me away from being a JW. It was very eye-opening, and reaffirming in a lot of ways to some of the doubts that I had put in the doubt box for years. And all of these things all literally happened at once. And I could not deny it anymore. It was time to go. I couldn't ethically stay. I wanted changes that were never going to change in the organization. Didn't go through a huge stage of denial where I wanted it to be true. I didn't want to sit there and say, oh, I want this to be true. No, it has to be true. No, it has to be true. No. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And I couldn't live with myself doing something that I knew felt wrong, and that I knew was wrong in a lot of different ways. So I had to move on. I had to get my life. I said, I'm in my mid-30s now. I gotta go. I gotta go get the rest of my life. I had to level up in my career. I figured out what I wanted to do in my career. I had to make up a little bit of lost time. I had to repair my relationship with my family, my non-JW family. That's an ongoing work in progress. I had to get money. So I was working literally 80 hours. I worked 80 hours a week. I slept from Sunday to Wednesday. I only slept 2 hours a day. So I worked that type of schedule for 6 months, because again, I had been financially supported by my JW family because of what I was doing for the organization. So I knew that was going to dry up when I told them I was leaving. So I really just doubled down on the work so that I had something. That was the other thing too. I've been in financial distress, and who comes to the help first? Non-JWs. They're right there. They hear an issue. They, oh, I'll get dinner for you this week. Do you need a ride to the car shop? I know a friend. What do you need for your apartment? Things like that. Non-JWs barely know me. They definitely don't know me as much as JWs do. So the world became a lot less scary. And again, knowing who my family was, not my non-JW family, I knew who they were. So I knew it wasn't like the JWs had said. So I wasn't as afraid to leave, but I did have to be okay with going and all the consequences, which I did. I got to a point where I was okay with the consequences and moved on. I had to. I didn't have a choice. I wanted my life to be full. I wanted to do things that I knew were right and live autonomously. And so this was what I had to do. So I did it.
So when you, at the beginning of the interview, when you said that you're shunned, as a question, so to speak, so you just said, I was aware of the consequences and so on and so forth, but I had to go ethically do what was right for me. So then, was there hard shunning? Did some people shun? Because it doesn't sound like you disassociated. You just said, right? Am I right? You just said, "Hey, I'm walking away from this thing," and you just kind of did. So then, has there been hard shunning by some, soft shunning? What's the situation been for you?
Yeah, by and large, soft shunning for sure across the board. Hard shunning for, I would say, a good amount of people. And as far as my family goes, I kind of keep that private only for them, because I don't want any issues
Sure.
with them, with the organization. With me, they don't have any issues, and usually an automatic response I have is my communication lines are open with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Just so you are aware, I'm not cutting off any of you. and you can decide how you want to deal with me. And I left before the shunning rules changed. I left before the beard rules changed. I left before the pants rules changed. So I I I just found it very strange how people dealt with me after that. Because it happened so quickly, those changes after I left, that no one even really knew that I had left. And then when people started to learn that I did leave, and they started to find the reasons why I left, it was weird for them. There was no formal announcement of me leaving. Whether or not there will be, I don't care. I won't know. But I do know that I am done, and the way that people are treating me is kind of really up to them. Some of them may call a family, may call a check to see if I'm okay. Some friends I had rarely check on me, but it's always with that now, this huge, what do you call that? I don't know how to paint it, like a token. Hey, so I talked to KJ the other day, and they're like, oh, how was that? And they're like, oh, I just called him to see how he was doing, and and let him know that the convention was coming up, or see if he went to the memorial. So that was weird. Like it's been kind of like that.
And you're not disfellowshipped either, so
Right,
you don't have that extra
Right.
layer. But
what difference? Like I said before, it doesn't make a difference to me. I'm living my life. So,
right.
So whether an announcement or not.
Yes.
So to me, it doesn't. To them, it makes a difference because of the announcement, but to me, no. Yeah, so it's weird how people are reacting to it. When they do talk to me and I tell them where I'm at in my life and where my beliefs are, I'm very honest with it, I may get a more hard shun from people.
Sure.
That has been happening. But again, I have to move on. I have moved on with my life, and I can't be with this in and out wishy-washy thing with people. I'm so far from the young single foreign language elder that I was at this point. And my hope for the future is a physical one of financial well-being, a partner, possibly children, a house, whether or not I support a politician or not, whether or not I move to another state, country, things like that. How I contribute to society as it is right now, humankind as it is right now. That is where I'm at, and that's where I will continue to be, because I just cannot be driven by somebody's dusty book revelation of how we're supposed to live our life. I gotta keep it moving. I gotta keep it moving.
My original podcast, This JW Life, is my story, which started all of this. You can listen to it today on podcast apps and find more at thisjwlife.com. Or if you're interested, you can read my book, Becoming Jehovah, online for free at becomingjehovah.com. If you want to tell your story on the podcast, buy merch, or get more information, go to shunpodcast.com.